Did you sense a frustration in Kevin hating what was happening at the corporate level with WCW? Did he express to you that?
No, because with him, he was never relieved of duty, really.
He was there till the end.
Yeah. He was all like, anybody that spent the time to talk to him, like he was my right hand. Like when I was creative, I really leaned on Kevin more than anybody, but also Mike Graham. Mike Graham was smart as fuck. So that was, and then at that same time, Dusty was in there with us. And Dusty was pushing to try to get the creative control. So we were antagonists, but at the same time, all four of us it was a situation where it didn't matter where a good idea came from as long as it was a good idea. Like you could be in the business for a week and have a good idea. A good idea is a good idea. You didn't have to be top of the card or anything else.
Kevin as a worker, one of those guys, like a Buzz Sawyer too, maybe, where it looked like he was murdering somebody legitimately.
Kevin moved down to, Kevin lived here. He lived in Daytona Beach at the Peninsula for years and years, yeah.
So he was in the Keys too?
He moved from here to Islamorada.
Oh, okay.
And he had a gym down there called Froggy's.
Yeah,
which is still there. And so we went down one year on our way to Key West, and we spent probably 3 days in Islamorada so I could hang out with Kev. And it was our best friends, Vince and Tammy at that time, and then Max, their son, and then it was Tristan, Tamara, and myself. And we went to Kevin's house, and Kevin lived on the Gulf side of Islamorada. And we all still to this day, Vince has passed on, and then he was the first, and then Tristan passed. So it decimated the 6 of us. It was just like, but we all talk about that day specifically because it was the hottest day on earth. And we were sitting out and we were drinking beers at Kevin. But Kevin was so patient with T and Max. He took him down and showed him where to snorkel. And
he would, I heard from people who've been down there when you're out back with him, he would say, "You guys want some lobster?" And he'd put a fucking mask on, jump in, and come up with a lobster. It was that plentiful.
Yeah, he was such a great host. And we went out that night, and he had a buddy named John that went out with us. John was hanging out that night, and Vince and I were each other's worst company when it came. Especially like in the Keys, man, we'd drink. And we drank so much that night. I should say it was like maybe 7 o'clock a.m. when we call it a day, whatever the fuck. It was probably from noon to 7 a.m. the next day. And John said, he said, I had a headache for fucking 6 weeks. John was so hungover. It was just like, T really liked Kevin. And then when we got back, T and I we talked about Kevin when we were down in the Keys, down in the Key West. And I told him, I said, you got to look up some of Kevin's work. And he found some stuff from Japan where Kevin's got the spike and he's just gouging people and they're bleeding all over the place. And my son just thought, oh my God, like this guy's he's the shit, man.
Oh yeah.
So
he's scary. But even just shit, a squash match, the forearms.
Oh,
he looked like he was murdering someone.
There was a breed of guys in that era when you sat back as a greenhorn and you watched them. I remember the first time I watched Abdullah the Butcher come on Saturday TV from center stage, and he had the handicap match against 2 job guys, and he beat the fuck out of them with one of those kendo sticks. And I don't think the thing was gimmicked.
I don't think those sticks were, because they were.
Yeah, you can gimmick them where they're a little bit they're a little bit tamer than the real deal.
Yeah, but you're still getting hit with a fucking stick, even if it's
But I just watched him. I said, wow. I remember watching Rude when Rude, I think it was Super Brawl or something like that, was from that we were at the Mecca in Milwaukee, and at the end of the show, Sting went over, but then Rude attacked him in the back, and Rude fucking hit Steve with like 4 or 5 like live shots, and swelled Sting's eye all up. And I remember when I was going up and down the road, and I just looked at him. I said, "Man," I said, don't you worry about coming in and being that careless?" He goes, "Man, you got one fucking time to come in your first time to get over." He said, I can say I'm sorry and fucking beg for a receipt the fucking rest of the time I'm there. He said, but he said, that fucking first impression, he said, you get that once. I was just like, okay, got it.
Kevin also built his career and stayed relevant without having gone to WWE after he established stardom. He worked for Vince Sr. as a jobber in, I think, 76. I know this because our series timeline that we used to produce, when we would choose somebody to cover a year in a federation, one of the things was they had to work on near the top and they had to be there all year. And once you got like into the 70s, because of all the territories, nobody stayed anywhere for a year. So it was very hard filling in years like 76, 75. And I remember Anthony doing all the research. He said there's one name who was here from January to December. I said, who? He said, Kevin Sullivan, doing jobs. But after he achieved prominence with the pencil, but also in the ring, he never cashed in.
Because he had that great Florida run.
That made him. That made him. Yeah.
I mean,
early 80s.
That was the territory.
Yeah.
You know.
And doing the other thing, I don't know that I realized this, but he did the dark kind of occult thing. There's one word he never said was the devil or Satan. And he was able to, I remember talking to him about it. He said, I threw the Buddha Dean and all this shit that people didn't know what I was talking about, but I never had to get specific with Satan or nothing like that. And he was right. He was able to do it just by building this kind of mystical figure, scary.
I think my favorite Kevin Sullivan quote is, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. That was...
He had so many. My favorite.
Fuck, man.
It was on the air in one of our shows together. It might have been. Everyone's talking about this one now. Steve, we should get it up if I don't have it. Kevin Sullivan and the end of WCW. Kind of dovetails into two things that are popular in wrestling media right now. But we sat him down. It was a special investigative special on the channel. And we went through the last 5 months, week by week. Read what was happening on camera and behind the scenes to get his take of what was going on in the locker rooms and offices as this shit was falling apart. It's fascinating. It was one of our best performing titles, and it wasn't even one of our series. But I think it was on that one. He said, you know the old saying, right? What do old prostitutes, old buildings, and old politicians have in common? I said, what? He goes, credibility. That's Kev, man.
Yeah. Never, it's just